Every betrayal has a sound. Mine began with a knock. It came just after noon, when the lake outside lay quiet under a pale winter sky and the birch trees stood bare, guarding the yard like sentinels. I opened the door and found my father, Henry Lowell, on the porch. Shoulders back, chin high, as if he'd brought me good news. The scent of his aftershave, too sharp and expensive for the country air, cut through the faint smoke from my stove. Without asking, he stepped inside. His hands trembled slightly as he reached into his coat pocket, and an envelope slid onto my kitchen table. A cashier's check followed, its printed numbers clear and cruel, $10,000. There, he said, sitting across from me. Enough for you to start fresh. Maybe you can find a place in Portland or even New Haven. The cabin's taken care of now. $2.5 million cash. It was the right move. I stared at the check, saying nothing. My fingers found the small brass key I wore on a chain around my neck, the one that once opened the cabin door. Now it opened nothing at all. You sold the cabin, I said, my voice quieter than I expected. You've been too busy to manage it, he replied, almost cheerful. I spared you the weight of it, Maggie. You should be thanking me. He smiled like a man who believed he'd done something noble. He mistook my silence for surrender. But I'd already rewritten the ending. The story didn't start with that check. It began 6 winters earlier, the day my mother died. I was 23, standing in a courthouse in Camden while a probate judge signed papers that handed me the lake cabin. My father hadn't wanted it then. He wanted what it could become, what it could sell for. The cabin had been decaying for years. The roof sagged, windows stuck with rot, the porch leaned like it had given up. But I stayed. Someone had to. By day, I worked in town, stocking shelves, managing invoices, doing whatever paid. By night, I stripped wallpaper and patched beams until my fingers bled. Every repaired board was a conversation with my mother. Every nail I drove was a promise to her memory. I still remember her on the stone steps that led down to the lake, a wool blanket around her shoulders, watching the light shift across the water. She never said the cabin was meant to protect me, but I felt it in the way she wrote my name on the deed. It was her way of giving me something solid, something my father could never trade or gamble away. He saw it differently. To him, it was just an asset he didn't control. For years, his calls came steady, just a little help, he'd say. A loan till Friday. A few thousand for repairs. It started small. $300 turned to $2,000, then $4,000. I told myself it was family duty. That if I kept the money in my hands, I could prevent disaster. But each favor pulled me deeper into silence. Then came the call that cracked it open. It was Ben, my cousin, his voice tight with unease. He'd been at a marina bar in Rockport, half listening to dockworkers trade stories, when my father's name came up. Henry had been bragging that the lake place would be gone by the end of the week. A deal already made. Cash in hand. Then Ben hesitated before saying the part that froze my blood. Dad had told the bar that I was too naive to notice a forged signature, and then laughed. That laugh, even secondhand, felt like a knife twisting under my ribs. By morning, I was in the office of Clara Devlin, a local attorney in Camden. She listened while I told her everything. The debts, the years of pressure, the rumors, the check. She didn't interrupt, just took notes with a steady hand, her pen scratching across yellow paper. When I finished, she looked up and said, "He's already filed a forged power of attorney. If we don't act now, the county could record a fake deed before you even know it exists." My hands shook as I signed the form she prepared. We placed the cabin into an irrevocable trust, naming me both trustee and lifetime beneficiary. Each signature felt like carving my name into steel. "This isn't inheritance anymore," Clara said. "It's protection." She also filed a fraud alert with the Knox County Registry of Deeds, a safeguard that would flag any suspicious filings. I walked out into the freezing air, feeling like I was finally breathing again. That night, I filled the cabin with quiet witnesses, small cameras hidden in the rafters, one above the kitchen door, one in the office where my father used to sit. Their blinking red lights looked like tiny beating hearts. Meanwhile, Clara traced the bank activity linked to the supposed fire. It led back to one of my father's poker friends, a man I remembered from barbecues when I was a kid. The deal was nothing but a shell game built on borrowed lies. Then, a week later, the registry clerk, a woman named Marla, called Clara. Someone had dropped off forged documents after hours. The timing was suspicious. The signatures off. Marla promised they wouldn't slip through. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being cornered. I was ready. And I wasn't afraid anymore. People think revenge burns hot. They're wrong. It's cold, calculated, like ice forming under the surface of still water. For days after Marla's call, I barely slept. My phone buzzed with messages from my father, each one shorter than the last. Call me. We need to talk. Don't make this worse than it already is. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove to the cabin every morning before sunrise. The snow had begun to fall in thick, heavy flakes, coating the roof and swallowing sound. I sat by the window with coffee gone cold, watching the empty road for his truck. It didn't take long. 3 days later, just past dawn, the rumble of his tires cracked the silence. The same old blue Ford he'd had for decades, dented on one side, mirror duct-taped in place. He parked crooked by the porch, left the engine idling, and stepped out like a man coming to claim what was his. "Morning, Maggie," he said, as though we were still family. "We need to sort this out before it gets ugly." I didn't move. "You mean before you get caught?" His smile faltered. "Now that's not fair. You know I've always had your best interest." I laughed, and the sound startled even me. It was sharp and bitter, like something broken loose after years underground. "Your best interest? You forged my name, Dad. You tried to steal the only thing Mom ever trusted me with." He sighed, that weary fatherly act he wore like armor. "You never understood how the world works. You think that cabin is freedom, but it's just a liability. Taxes, maintenance, isolation, it's eating you alive." He took a step closer. I reached for the small recorder in my coat pocket, thumb pressing the red button. "And $2.5 million would solve that, right?" I asked. He didn't answer. He just gave me that same reasonable smile, the one that had fooled so many others. "You're emotional, Maggie. I get it. But once this all settles down, you'll thank me." I wanted to scream, but the camera above the doorway blinked steady and calm. Instead, I said softly, "You should go before this gets uglier." He stared at me for a long time, eyes flat and cold, then turned back to his truck. Tires spun on the ice as he drove away. The silence afterward felt like the end of something sacred. Later that week, Clara called. "We've got what we need," she said. "Registry confirmed the forgery attempt. Bank statements show funds moving through 2 accounts in your father's name. It's fraud, Maggie. You can press charges." I stared out the window at the frozen lake. The idea of sending my father to jail didn't feel like justice. It felt like grief with paperwork. What if I just let him destroy himself? I asked. Clara hesitated. "He already has." She was right. Over the next month, things started to unravel for him. Word got around town, small places have long memories. A contractor he owed money to filed a lien. His poker friend skipped town, leaving him with a pile of unpaid debts. The same people who used to laugh at his stories stopped answering his calls. He came by once more, late one night. I heard the crunch of gravel under his tires, then a knock, soft this time, almost polite. When I opened the door, his face looked older, hollowed out by shame or maybe whiskey. "Maggie," he said quietly. I didn't mean for it to go this far. For a second, I almost believed him. But then he added, "If you'd just signed what I asked, none of this would have happened." I stepped outside, the cold slicing through my sweater. "You forged my name, Dad. You lied. You tried to sell Mom's legacy for poker money." His breath came in white clouds. "I built that place too. Don't forget that." "No," I said. "You just forgot what it meant." He looked like he wanted to argue, but instead he dropped his gaze, muttered something I couldn't catch, and walked away. The sound of his boots on snow faded into nothing. Inside, I sank to the floor. My hands were shaking. The anger had burned out, leaving only exhaustion, the kind that seeps into your bones. The next morning, Clara sent me a file, an official notice confirming that the forged documents were null and void. The trust was safe. The cabin was legally untouchable. I thought that would bring peace. It didn't. The cameras were still running, though I couldn't bring myself to check the footage. Until one evening, when I noticed something strange, a light flickering through the trees near the boathouse. At first, I thought it was reflection, moonlight on the ice. But then it moved. Closer. Brighter. By the time I ran outside, the smell of gasoline was thick in the air. The first thing I remember is the smell, sharp, chemical, wrong. Then came the crackling. By the time I reached the lake, orange light was licking the side of the boathouse. Flames twisted up the wooden beams, swallowing the walls in seconds. I shouted, but the wind carried the sound back at me. "Dad!" I screamed, though I didn't know why. He hadn't been there for weeks. Still, some small part of me believed he might be, hiding, desperate, trying to reclaim what he'd lost. The fire spread fast. The gas cans I kept for the generator were stacked by the door. I hadn't even thought about them. Within moments, they ignited, sending a wave of heat so fierce it made my skin prickle. I grabbed the hose by the cabin and turned the handle, but the line was frozen solid. Water refused to flow. My hands went numb as I fought with the nozzle uselessly. Then headlights. A car skidded down the driveway, tires crunching over ice. Ben jumped out, half-dressed, coat over pajamas. "Jesus, Maggie," he shouted. "What happened?" "I don't know. It started out of nowhere." He ran to the cabin's exterior spigot, tried another hose, nothing. Frozen too. All we could do was watch as the boathouse collapsed inward, the roof sinking like a dying lung. When the volunteer fire truck finally arrived 20 minutes later, there wasn't much left to save. The boathouse was gone, a smoking skeleton. The water at the shore steamed like breath. A firefighter, face streaked with soot, asked, "Anyone inside?" "No," I said quickly. "No one." But even as I said it, doubt gnawed at me. I didn't see my father's truck that night, but the next morning, I found fresh tire tracks in the snow near the tree line. Faint, but real. They curved toward the boathouse and back out again, as if someone had come to watch the fire and then vanished. Clara drove up later that day. She didn't speak at first, just stood beside me, staring at the charred remains. "You think it was him," she said finally. "I don't know what to think," I whispered. She folded her arms, expression unreadable. "If he did it, it's arson. And you could file a criminal report. I don't want this to become another war." She sighed. "It already is, Maggie. You just haven't accepted you're the one winning." But I didn't feel like I was winning. The boathouse had been my mother's favorite spot. She used to paint there, the smell of turpentine mixing with the lake air. Now it was blackened ruin. That night, I finally checked the camera footage. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the hours, pixelated snow filling the screen. At 11:47 p.m., motion triggered the feed from the back path. A figure moved through the trees, tall, heavy-shouldered, wearing a winter coat I recognized instantly. My father. He stopped near the boathouse door, something glinting in his hand. A metal can. He hesitated, looked toward the cabin, then disappeared from view. 2 minutes later, light flared. I froze the frame and just stared. He wasn't just reckless. He was willing. The footage was enough. Proof. But what do you do when the person you're proving guilty is your own blood? The next morning, I drove into Camden and handed the flash drive to Clara. She watched the clip in silence, her jaw tightening. "This is clear enough for the sheriff," she said quietly. "Do you want me to send it in?" I thought about it for a long time, about every argument, every borrowed dollar, every apology that came too late. Then I nodded. Yes. The call went out that afternoon. By evening, Sheriff Keegan had issued a warrant for questioning. But Henry Lowell was nowhere to be found. His house was empty, dishes still in the sink, a coat draped over the chair, but no sign of him. 3 days passed. Then a letter arrived. No return address, just my name, written in his uneven handwriting. Inside was a single sheet of paper. "Maggie, I didn't mean for things to go this far. I just needed a way out. The cabin made me weak. I thought burning it would free me and you. I see now that I was wrong about both. Don't come looking. I'll settle this my way. Dad. My stomach turned cold. I called Clara, voice shaking. She contacted the sheriff, who sent deputies to comb the woods and nearby towns, but there was nothing, no trace of him, no truck, no footprints past the ridge. Winter deepened. Snow swallowed the lake. The air went still again, but the quiet didn't feel peaceful anymore. It felt like waiting. Some nights, I'd wake to the creak of ice on the lake and imagine it was footsteps. Sometimes I'd step outside, half expecting to see his truck lights through the trees. Weeks passed. The investigation stalled. The fire was ruled probable arson by unknown party. I told myself I was fine, that he was gone for good. But guilt doesn't leave when the danger does, it just changes shape. Then, one morning in early February, I found something frozen into the lake's edge. A small, rusted key, the kind that used to unlock the boathouse door. And I realized he hadn't disappeared. Not completely. They pulled him from the lake on the first clear morning of March. The ice had started to break, long cracks stretching across the surface like veins of light. A local fisherman found the truck first, half submerged near the North Cove. Then, not far from it, my father. The sheriff came himself to tell me. His voice was soft, like he was afraid I'd shatter. We think he went in sometime that night after the fire, he said. The current kept him under until the thaw. I stood at the kitchen window, watching the slow drip of melting snow from the roof. The cabin looked almost peaceful. Smoke curled from the chimney, coffee steamed in my mug. It could have been any morning in any year, except now the world had finally caught up to what I already knew. The story was over. Clara came by later, papers in hand. She didn't say sorry. She just placed the folder on the table and said, "The trust is secure. The investigation's closed. You can move on now." Move on. 2 words that sound so easy and feel impossible. That night, I walked to the lake. The ice was gray and soft around the edges, the water below restless, whispering against the shore. I found the place where they'd pulled him out and sat there for a long time, watching the moonlight tremble across the surface. He used to bring me here when I was little. We'd fish from the dock and eat peanut butter sandwiches Mom made. He'd point at the far shore and say, "That's where the world ends, kiddo." I used to believe him. Now I knew better. The world doesn't end, it changes shape. It breaks and then it keeps going. The sheriff had returned his things to me earlier that afternoon. His watch, his wallet, a rusted keyring, and a folded piece of paper sealed in a plastic bag. I hadn't opened it then. I did now. Maggie, if you're reading this, I'm sorry. Not for what I did, I can't pretend I didn't know better, but for who I became. I told myself it was about money, but it wasn't. It was envy. You had what I lost when your mother died, a reason to still care about this place. I wanted to own it because I couldn't stand that it didn't need me anymore. That you didn't. I know you won't forgive me, but I hope someday you'll understand me. Take care of the cabin. It was always meant for you. Dad. The words blurred in the moonlight. I didn't cry, I thought I would, but all I felt was a strange, hollow calm. Forgiveness didn't come, not exactly. But the anger slipped away like mist over the water. I stayed until the cold began to sting my fingers. When I stood, I noticed something half buried in the mud near the shoreline, a piece of scorched wood, small enough to fit in my hand. The last remnant of the boathouse. I picked it up, the char still faintly black against the grain. It wasn't just ruin anymore. It was proof that things survive even after they burn. The spring thaw came fast that year. By April, the lake was alive again, loons calling at dawn, wind stirring through the trees. I rebuilt the boathouse myself, board by board. Not perfect, not new, but honest. Ben helped me a few weekends. Clara came once, bringing sandwiches and lemonade. She looked at the half-finished structure and said, "You're stubborn, you know that?" I smiled. I learned from the best. We laughed, and for the first time in a long while, it didn't hurt. Summer crept in slow. I started painting again, not like my mother, not landscapes or still lives, just small things, the reflection of light on the water, the shape of a bird in flight, the outline of a memory I didn't want to lose. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear the knock. That same sound that started everything. But now it doesn't scare me. It reminds me I survived it. The cabin stands quiet but alive, full of echoes that don't haunt me anymore. The walls hum with stories, with all the years we tried to destroy and ended up preserving instead. When I look out at the lake, I don't see loss. I see inheritance, not of property or money, but of strength. Because what my father never understood is that love isn't ownership. It's endurance. And some things, no matter how hard you try to bury or burn them, find their way back to the surface. Just like the lake. Just like me.